The summer Alex turned 15, he returned to the place he had looked forward to all year long, his grandfather's ranch near the Grand Canyon, right by the Colorado River in Arizona. It was a land of red rocks, endless sky, and secrets buried beneath 1,000 layers of stone. His grandfather lived alone in a rustic wooden cabin nestled near the cliffs. Every summer, Alex came back here, and over the years, he had become close friends with two local boys, Tom, who was bold and imaginative, and Lucas, quiet but always thinking 2 steps ahead. Together, they had spent countless hours exploring the land, camping under the stars, and daring each other with ghost stories by the fire. But this year, something was different. One late afternoon, while playing hide and seek in the back shed, Alex stumbled upon an old leather pouch tucked behind some crates. Inside was a worn, faded map. Ink lines drawn by hand snaked across a desert landscape, ending at a strange symbol that looked like a cave entrance. In one corner, written in rough scrawl, "Snake Hollow, not for the faint of heart." Alex rushed to show Tom and Lucas. They huddled around the map, eyes wide. "This could be a real cave," Tom said, voice full of excitement. "We have to check it out." Lucas frowned. "The desert's dangerous. People get lost out there." Still, curiosity won them over. The next morning, they packed supplies, flashlights, rope, snacks, water, pocket knives, and of course, the mysterious map. The sun had just risen, casting long shadows across the sand. They followed the directions carefully, counting rock formations and cactus clusters, tracing the hand-drawn lines like they were on a treasure hunt. As they moved deeper into the desert, the air grew quieter, heavier. Wind whispered through crevices like hushed voices. Strange tracks, not quite human, not quite animal, appeared in the sand. At one point, Scott stuck squeezing through a narrow rock passage, and Tom had to help him out of it while Lucas held the flashlight steady. By midday, they reached a towering cliff wall. At its base, a dark opening. The cave entrance was surrounded by jagged rocks, and above it, etched into the stone, was a symbol of a snake coiled around a sword. No one spoke. They switched on their flashlights and stepped inside. The air immediately turned cold and damp. The walls shimmered faintly, like they were lined with quartz or some other crystal. The tunnel sloped downward. "We need to mark our way," Lucas said. "If we get lost in here." Tom unraveled a roll of red cord and tied one end to a rock at the entrance. Slowly, carefully, they descended. After about 20 minutes of winding passages, they entered a large underground chamber. The walls were covered in primitive drawings, figures of humans, animals, and strange hybrids, part serpent, part man. One mural showed a massive snake swallowing someone whole. "Maybe this was some kind of ancient ritual site?" Alex whispered. As they examined the drawings, a noise echoed from deeper in the tunnel, a dragging sound, heavy and slow. Lucas swung his flashlight around. Nothing. "Probably just rocks," Tom offered, though his voice was shaky. Then Alex's flashlight flickered. In one brief flash, he saw it, a tall, dark figure at the far end of the chamber. Not a person, not a snake. Something else, something watching them. "Run!" Lucas shouted. They bolted, following the red cord, hearts pounding. The sound of something slithering grew louder behind them. Tom dropped his flashlight. It smashed against the stone and went dark. They didn't stop until daylight burned their eyes again, and they stumbled out into the open desert, gasping for breath. They sat in silence for a long while, the cave entrance looming behind them. "What did we just escape from?" Alex finally asked. "I don't know," Lucas replied, "but it didn't want us there." On the way back to the ranch, none of them spoke much, but their eyes were full of the kind of fear and thrill that only a real adventure could bring. They knew this summer would stay with them forever. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, Alex looked back toward the canyon. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow move near the cave's edge. He blinked. It was gone. On his last day, the 3 boys sat on the porch steps, watching the wind ripple across the red dirt. "Next summer," Alex said, "we're going back, right?" Tom grinned. "Absolutely. But next time, we bring a camera. Proof, or no one will believe us." Lucas chuckled. "And maybe a few weapons." Alex smiled, eyes drifting to the horizon. "Next year, we continue the adventure." My name is Ray, and this happened back in 2017 when I was a freelance landscape photographer. I had a habit, some would say a strange one, of seeking out the most remote least traveled places to capture landscapes no one else had seen. That September, I set out for a desolate stretch of desert in eastern Arizona. It wasn't a tourist spot. In fact, it didn't even show up on Google Maps. It was just a vast expanse of reddish sand, crisscrossed by fading trails and scattered with long-forgotten ruins. Locals called it the Whisper Dunes. I didn't think much of the name until I heard them. I arrived in the late afternoon. The sky was clear, the wind mild, a perfect evening for photography. I pitched my small tent at the edge of a wide dune valley miles from any paved road. Out there, it was just me, my camera, and the silence of the desert. Around 6 p.m., I climbed up a high dune to catch the sunset. While setting up my tripod, I heard something, faint like a whisper. I turned around. Nothing. Just wind. Probably just the breeze, I thought. Then I heard it again, louder, clearer, a voice. Raspy, slow, like someone murmuring directly behind me. I spun around, heart pounding. No one there. Chilled, I packed up quickly and hiked back to my tent. But the feeling that someone or something was watching me never left. That night, sleep didn't come easy. The desert wind whipped around the tent, but mixed in with it were sounds I couldn't explain. Muted footsteps, faint murmurs that rose and fell like a strange chant. Around midnight, I heard someone or something walking in circles around my tent. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the flap. Outside, nothing but dark sand and shadows, not even footprints. But then I noticed something. The tent zipper, it was already unzipped. I was sure I had locked it. My stomach sank. Was someone messing with me? A drifter? A lost hiker? I stayed awake the rest of the night, gripping my camping knife, flashlight on. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I dozed off just before dawn. In the morning, I convinced myself it was all nerves and imagination. I wasn't going to let fear ruin the trip or the photos. I grabbed my camera gear and hiked further into the dunes. I was looking for a specific landmark I'd heard about, ancient ruins half buried in the sand. About an hour in, I found it. A crumbling stone wall rising out of the sand. Symbols were etched into the surface, tribal looking but unfamiliar. I raised my camera to take a shot. That's when I heard it again, this time right in my ear, whispering, closer than ever in a language I didn't understand. My spine went cold. I turned, nobody. This was no longer just wind or imagination. I decided to head back, but something was off. The sand felt deeper, the wind louder. I checked my compass. It spun wildly. My GPS failed. My phone had no service. I walked west, back the way I came. But somehow the sun was still ahead of me. I was walking in circles. Then I saw a figure, far off, standing on the ridge of a dune. Relieved, I ran toward them. Maybe another hiker, maybe help. As I got closer, the figure turned. He was tall and thin, draped in a tattered cloak. His face was coated in sand, and his eyes, sunken and dark, locked onto mine. He didn't speak, but I heard something. Not from his mouth, from the wind around us. It whispered. I asked who he was. He raised a bony hand and pointed behind him toward a massive dune. Then he was gone. No footsteps. No sign he'd ever been there. Panic set in. I turned and sprinted in the opposite direction, and after what felt like hours, I finally spotted my tent in the distance. But something was wrong. The flap was open. My gear had been tossed around. My camera's memory card was gone. My printed maps, shredded. I didn't wait. I threw everything into the car and drove. As my tires crossed the edge of the sand onto gravel, I heard one last whisper behind me. This time in perfect English. Next time you won't leave. I never went back. Later, I told the story to a Navajo friend who grew up not far from there. When I mentioned the name Whisper Dunes, his face went pale. He said, "That place is cursed. The old ones say the spirits of the lost are trapped in the wind. They whisper to lure others in, so they won't be alone." Since that day, I never explored the desert alone again. And if you ever find yourself out in the dunes and hear whispering in the wind, don't answer it. Eli was never the kind of man to stay still. In his early 30s and based in Utah, he had spent the better part of a decade exploring the remote landscapes of the American West, from the red canyons of Arizona to the desolate plateaus of Nevada. But it was the sweeping sand dunes of southern Utah that made him feel most alive. That time, he planned a 3-day solo hike along the outer edges of the San Rafael Desert. Eli was meticulous. He carried a handheld GPS, topographical maps, dried food, extra water, a lightweight tent, and backup batteries. What he didn't expect was the sandstorm. On the second day, while crossing a narrow valley of dunes, the wind began to pick up. Sand swirled into the air, and within the hour, visibility dropped to almost nothing. His GPS glitched, then completely shut down. No signal, no direction, just Ely and the unrelenting howl of wind and sand. He pressed forward blindly, hoping to find shelter before nightfall. That's when he saw it, a roof barely protruding from the dunes, a small, time-worn cabin almost completely buried, weathered wood, sun-bleached and worn. Eli figured it might be an old ranger station or a forgotten prospector's shack. He brushed sand away from the door. It creaked open under his touch, surprisingly intact. Inside was a single room, absent from any map he had ever studied. Everything inside was still. A small bed with a wool blanket, a wooden table with a kerosene lamp, a few cabinets, and a faded photo frame hanging on the wall. A porcelain cup sat on the table, cracked and covered in a fine layer of sand. There were no spider webs, no signs of animals, just dust, a soft, pale dust blanketing every surface, as if someone had once lived there, a very long time ago. Eli hesitated, but with darkness falling and the storm still raging, he decided it was his best option. He shut the door, locked it with the old wooden latch, lit the lamp, and wrapped himself in the wool blanket. Sometime around midnight, Eli woke up. At first, he didn't know why, but then he heard it. A knock! Slow, steady, knock, knock, knock. It wasn't the wind. It was clear, rhythmic, like knuckles tapping gently on wood. Eli froze. He listened harder. No voices, no footsteps, just the same sound. Knock, knock. His heart pounded. Part of him thought it had to be a dream. But no, he was awake, wide awake. He quietly reached for his small pocket knife, crept to the door, and placed his hand on the latch. The knocking stopped the moment he touched it. He pulled the door open. Nothing, only the desert, still, cold, silent. The wind had died. The moon hung high above, casting a pale glow over the dunes. That's when he saw them. Footprints, clear, deep impressions in the soft sand, leading away from the cabin, not toward anything, just out into the dunes. Eli stepped outside, scanning the horizon. He called out. No response, no echoes, only the emptiness. And yet he felt it, that he was no longer alone. The next morning, Eli left the cabin. He marked the location on his paper map, snapped a few pictures of the structure with his phone under the rising sun, and then hours later, regained GPS signal and made his way back to civilization. In the nearby town, he asked around, locals who'd lived there their whole lives, older folks who knew the area inside and out. None of them had ever heard of a cabin out there. No ranger records, no mining claims, no mentions on any official maps. Eli printed the map, circled the location, and a few weeks later, he returned. Same route, same coordinates, but when he got there, the cabin was gone. No roof, no door, no wood, no footprints, no foundation. Just sand. Miles and miles of untouched, wind-swept dunes, like nothing had ever been there at all. I met Eli a few years later at a geographic exploration seminar. He told me the story casually, not trying to spook me, just sharing something unexplainable. Do you think it was a dream? I asked. He smiled faintly. Maybe, he said. But I still have the photo. The cabin, the footprints, they're still on my old phone. And sometimes at night, I still hear it. Knock, knock, knock. He looked away, as if remembering something far off. I've started to think I wasn't the first person to sleep in that cabin. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't the only one who woke up there that night.